mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone to Diabetes Sisters Life Class webinar featuring Adam Brown and Bright Spots and Landmines. My name is Anna Norton, and I'm the CEO of Diabetes Sisters. I'm also going to be moderating the webinar today. Diagnosed in 2001 with diabetes, Adam currently serves as the senior editor of diaTribe.org, an online publication who, like Diabetes Sisters, serves to improve the lives of people living with diabetes. He shares his diabetes stories in his column, Adam's Corner, and is recognized as a leading expert in diabetes technology. He's a graduate of the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and currently lives in the Bay Area. Today, Adam and I are going to be speaking about his book, where he shares many of the strategies that have had a positive impact on his life with diabetes. The title of his book, Bright Spots and Landmines, argues that focusing on problems and errors in diabetes, the landmines, sometimes has us miss the bigger opportunity, our bright spots. We have a list of questions that you've submitted over the last couple of weeks, but if you have any additional questions, please use your dashboard if you're online to the right of your screens to submit them. We're going to get started now. Thanks. Welcome, Adam. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, great. I'm so excited to have you on. I know that a lot of our followers follow your column, and I know that they're excited that you're participating in a Diabetes Sisters program online where we can reach more women, more people that live with diabetes. And I'm really excited to talk about your book today because I think I read it in 2 sittings. And I'm a big fan, and we've been talking about your book online for a couple of weeks now, so it's really an honor and a privilege to have you on.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Let's get started. One of the chapters of the book focuses on mindset, and a particular section speaks about blood glucose numbers not being neither good nor bad. Can you expand a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the book, just for people who may not be familiar with it, has 4 chapters: food, mindset, exercise, and sleep. And each chapter shares what I call bright spots, which are the things that I'm doing well that I should be doing more often, or the kind of helpful tips that actually make a really positive difference and that I want to duplicate and clone as often as possible. So the mindset chapter is the second chapter in the book, but honestly is probably my favorite chapter to read and reread again and again because it sort of underlies everything that we do in diabetes. And the first, one of the first bright spots in the mindset chapter is this idea that blood glucose numbers are neutral information. They're data points to make a decision, and they're not judgments or grades on my performance or my ability to manage my diabetes. And so it sounds quite simple, but it's pretty profound. And the analogy I use to describe it in the book is if I was a pilot flying a plane and I look at the temperature readings on the plane and I see that, I look at the speed readings or the GPS on the plane and I see that things are out of range. The plane is not going in the right direction. The speed's too fast. I don't look at those readings and say to myself, I'm a terrible pilot. The readings are out of range. What a pilot would do is look at the readings, use them as objective information, change the way the plane is flying, and then carry on. And so I think we should be viewing blood glucose data in this same way as a speedometer for our diabetes. So I think when I was diagnosed, I definitely viewed it as grades on my performance, and that leads to a downward spiral of not checking as often because none of us likes receiving grades, especially when the grades are not good. So I like to reframe blood glucose data as these neutral data points, objective information, helpful partner to make decisions, and that's made a big mindset bright spot difference for me.
Well, that's really wonderful, and I'm glad that you talked about that. Numbers are not bad, they're not good, they're just data. They're data points that help us to attain whatever goal we might have in blood sugar management. And I started talking about the second chapter, which was the mindful chapter, but a lot of the work that we do at Diabetes Sisters is about psychosocial wellness and how we manage diabetes, and the way that we approach it, and that it's a journey. But there's a really great part of the book, which is it's peppered throughout, and it's these little worksheets that are part of the book where we can practice mindfulness and we can journal a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about those sections and how they relate to the entire book?
Sure. So the book, one way to describe it is, this is kind of my toolkit of things that I've discovered that really help me manage my diabetes in these 4 areas. And obviously, some of the things that work for me aren't going to work for other people. So the example I like to give is, the first bright spot in the exercise chapter is walking. And walking is accessible to me year-round just because of where I live and where I live in the city. But I know there are people who can't walk for safety reasons or, because of weather or whatever. So not every bright spot or landmine will apply to a particular reader. And I wanted to still provide a lot of useful things in the book in those cases. And so every chapter has what I call the questions for you guides at the end. So there's food ones, mindset, exercise, and sleep ones. And these questions are intended to help people figure out what their own bright spots and landmines are and develop a plan for either replicating them in the case of bright spots or in the case of landmines, setting up a system so that you avoid them. And then at the end of the book, there's a final question guide that kind of wraps everything together. And so I'll just read some of the questions. I think people will get it pretty quickly, but some of the bright spot questions at the end of the book are, what is going well in my diabetes? What am I doing right that I should try to do more often? What happens on my best days with diabetes? What do I eat? What does my diabetes self-talk sound like? When and how do I exercise? How did I sleep the night before? What do loved ones do that is helpful? And if I wanted to have one of these bright spot days today, what would I do to make it happen? And then there's a couple others, like, what times of days or days of the week is my glucose consistently staying in range? So 70 to 140 or maybe 70 to 180, depending on what range you have. And then the key is, what choices or things do I do enable that to happen? And that's the key with bright spots and landmines, is figuring out those specific behaviors and routines and things that I do that I can try to duplicate and replicate more often. And so those are examples of just some bright spot questions. And then the landmine questions are kind of the converse. So on my most challenging days with diabetes, what goes wrong? What do I eat? What does my diabetes talk sound like? Do I exercise? How did I sleep? What do loved ones do? And the key then is setting up a system to avoid those. So if I wanted to avoid having a landmine day tomorrow, what are the sorts of things that I would do? And I think when we can answer that individually, it helps to kind of build that into life.
Of course. So all of these are this is a really great strategy for those of us that journal and write and take the time out of the day to reflect. But what advice do you have for those who just aren't natural recorders, who don't sit down, who are more mobile, or who maybe use their phone more often, or who just are just not accustomed to really writing things down? What advice would you give them in order to practice this mindfulness when it comes to distress and food and actions and these bright spots and these landmines?
Absolutely. Well, I'll say that, I wear a continuous glucose monitor, but I'm not really a compulsive recorder. So I would call myself maybe a casual observer. But I do think having periods where you're kind of running experiments in your own life, so approaching your diabetes like you're a scientist almost, and saying, hey, what happens when I do X? Like, what's the result? And X could be anything from, changing your schedule so that you exercise on different days of the week, or trying different exercises, trying different foods, and checking blood sugar before and after to see what happens. But the key is, it doesn't have to be a continuous, ongoing, crazy process of tracking. I think it can be very limited in scope, even to just, as people read the book, filling out these guides, and by the end of the book, you should have a very good sense of what your biggest bright spots and landmines are. And I think most of us, from at least people I've talked to in my own life, can pinpoint those those critical success factors that seem to help things a lot, or those critical stumbling blocks that seem to throw things way aside. And so the book is intended to help direct people to those. But even if you can't think of those, I think approaching life with diabetes through this lens of bright spots and landmines will naturally filter things into those categories if you're kind of watching your own behavior and watching what's happening with your diabetes on a day-to-day basis. And again, I recommend simple things like even just taking pictures of meals is really useful just to see what you're eating and reflect on them. You know, I like Evernote a lot in terms of taking notes on things that I'm trying or testing. So it doesn't have to be a crazy amount of, you know, data and compulsive recording for people who aren't into that. It can be a little bit more casual, and that's totally fine too. But the key, I think, is just bringing awareness to what's happening in your diabetes and trying to ask yourself, what are those bright spots that seem to yield positive results, and how can I have those happen more often? Or what are those landmines that seem to derail things, and what could I do to build less of them in?
Of course. And I think that that's great, you know, because again, we're all on this different spectrum of the way that we manage our diabetes, and we're all on a different spectrum in our journey with diabetes. But, you know, I'm not a natural recorder. I have to actually put time into my calendar to do so. So I found that the worksheets in the book were helpful to me just to even go through them and read them and then mentally say, oh, these are my bright spots. Oh, these are places where I can improve, or these are some changes that I can make, you know, and using the suggestions that you're talking about. So I appreciate that. But let's move into a little bit more about goals, because no matter where we are in our journey with diabetes, you know, we all should have them. We mostly do have them. So let's talk a little bit about them, how we attain them or how we're not attaining them. How do you, as a person living with diabetes, a person who works in diabetes, a person who writes about diabetes all the time, how do you continuously motivate yourself during this journey? You know, and feel free to talk about exercise, food, eating out, your own diabetes distress.
Sure, it's a wonderful question, because we're all living with this constant marathon that is diabetes, and it's not ending anytime soon. So that can get completely exhausting. And there are several things that I talk about in the book that I've found very useful. I'll just go through a couple of them. One is what I call this idea of a reframing. So most of us, when we're diagnosed, are told, you've got to take care of your diabetes so that you avoid complications. And that's factually true. But for me, when I was diagnosed, when I was young, I was 12, I think it has two problems. One is that the time horizon is so long that it's hard to think about how my actions today will yield consequences in many years, especially when those consequences accrue over the course of many years and are the result of many small actions. The other thing is that it's a very negative motivator. So do all this work so that you avoid this bad outcome, instead of do all this work so you have really awesome outcomes. So the time reframe is the first bright spot in the mindset chapter. And the idea is, how do in-range blood sugars benefit me today? Or even better, how do they benefit me right now? And so I know that when my blood sugar is in range, I have way more energy. Just my quality of life is better because my blood sugar is in range. I'm way kinder to the people around me. I do much better work at my job at diaTribe and at Close Concerns, which is very important to me. I'm just a better human being when my blood sugar is in range, and that benefit occurs today. So it's not a very long-term reason. And I think shortening that time horizon for me has helped really boost my motivation. Another one that I really focus on is, what's the impact of my diabetes decisions on the people around me? So one of the most powerful motivators is how we treat loved ones and colleagues and family. And I think they can be a tremendous source of support, and also a really compelling reason to take care of our diabetes today. And so that's another reason why I try to keep my blood sugar in range, is because I'm just not as nice of a person to my girlfriend when my blood sugar is high or low. And it causes her a lot of stress and anxiety when my blood sugar is out of range. And so that, to me, is yet another really powerful motivator. And then in terms of goals, I talk a lot about goals in the book. I think the things that have helped me the most are, one is just breaking down goals into tiny constituent parts that seem so achievable, they're almost silly. So one of the biggest landmines in the first landmine in the exercise chapter is this idea, oh, I don't have an hour, so I can't possibly exercise. And the solution to that landmine for me is 5 minutes of exercise beats 0. And 0 is what I would do on a super busy day when I'm using that all or nothing excuse. So can I do 5? And that's really helpful for this all or nothing mentality, but it's also just a really helpful way of thinking about goals in general. So if I have a huge goal, it's easy to focus on how big it is, how much there is to do, you know, whether it's running a 5K if I'm not a runner, or biking 100 miles, or whatever your goal might be in terms of health or losing 50 pounds. But breaking the goal down into a tiny, tiny thing that seems achievable is super key, because then you can build momentum and a sense of progress and feel like you're advancing, rather than focusing on the huge, daunting mountain climb in front of you. So those are a couple. I mean, one other one that I'll just mention is this idea of stakes. And by that I mean having something on the line. So when I sign up for a goal, how can I build accountability in so that I'm kind of socially forced to do it? And one of the ways I talk about this in the book is actually how I wrote this book. I used this cool website called stickk.com, S-T-I-C-K-K, and it allows you to set a goal and then name a referee. And in this case, my referee was my girlfriend. And then my goal was to finish the first draft of my book by last fall. I think it was October, maybe it was October 1st or October 31st, I can't remember. And she was my referee, and then I had stakes on the line. And so my stakes were actually an anti-charity. And the idea of an anti-charity is a charity that you do not support, which is a very compelling motivator, because if I did not achieve my goal, I would have been donating to this charity that I really do not like. So, you know, these are charities like, you know, the National Rifle Association, or, you know, you're the opposite of your political party. And it's a very compelling motivator, because you put your credit card information in, and then if your referee says that you didn't complete your goal, the money goes off to the anti-charity. And I know this won't be for everyone, but for people who are motivated by that kind of social accountability, and who, if you really care about achieving a goal, it's extremely powerful. So those are a few of the ways, I think. The time reframe, focusing on loved ones, breaking goals down into small parts, and then having some stakes.
Well, I think those are all really excellent points, and they're excellent bullets when we talk about, you know, attaining goals. I really love your anti-charity support. I think that is a huge motivator, because you know, we're talking financial motivation, right? Where we don't want our hard-earned dollars to go somewhere that we don't support. So I think that's wonderful. And I know that in our Diabetes Sisters groups, in many of them, a lot of us use accountability partners. So we're texting each other in the morning, or we're talking about, or we're saying things, you know, like, today, this is my goal, and then, you know, throughout the day, someone else is checking in. And so those are all really great factors. I was going to ask you about accountability partners, but you talked about accountability, so I'm so glad that you mentioned that, and validate some of the things that we're doing in our peer support groups at Diabetes Sisters. I want to talk about something that I call it your famous chia pudding. It came up in one of the diatribes or the newsletters. It must have been in Adam's Corner, and I remember reading about it, and then all of a sudden it started popping up all over the diabetes online community. So can you tell us a little bit about it, and how you came to sort of creating this powerful and good good for blood sugar breakfast to start your day. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Absolutely. So I can't take credit for inventing the concept of chia pudding, but the recipe is one that I've shared in diaTribe that I use, and I sort of cobbled it together. But the idea started with this concept that breakfast is really challenging. I mean, most breakfast foods, at least in the U.S., drive blood sugar up like crazy. I personally tend to be more insulin resistant in the morning, so eating typical breakfast foods is very challenging for keeping blood sugar in range. And then the other thing is just time is at a premium in the morning. I'm not a morning person in general, and so having something that's fast and simple to make is really valuable. And eggs are great, but I tire of eggs pretty easily. So I am always on the hunt for new foods and tips and tricks that can help keep blood sugar in range, require minimum effort. And I started experimenting with this concept of chia pudding, which I know sounds like a bit of a strange health food nut kind of thing, but the concept is chia seeds are these little seeds that look like poppy seeds, and when you mix them with water, they soak up the water and create this pudding or gel. What's nice is chia seeds don't really taste like anything, so it's all about what you mix into the pudding that flavors it. And they're almost exclusively fiber and omega-3s, so they don't really have an impact on blood sugar. I think they're 80 or 90% fiber. So I use 4 tablespoons of chia seeds in the morning. I mix it with half a cup of water, and that, when you mix it up for about a minute and let it sit for a minute, it creates this pudding-like gel. And then from there, you can kind of throw in whatever you want. I tend to throw in a lot of cinnamon and a little bit of coconut oil or coconut shavings, some berries, and some nuts and seeds like sunflower seeds and almonds and peanuts. And it makes this nice, super fibrous cereal that I can take 1 unit of insulin for it right when I start eating. It doesn't increase my blood sugar at all. It keeps me full for hours, and it doesn't need cooking. So I bring it to conferences when I'm traveling, and it only takes 3 minutes to make. And all the ingredients combined, it ends up being about 60 cents per meal. So I'm a tremendous fan of it, and people have had very similarly positive outcomes. What does seem to trip people up is the coconut oil. So if you've tried this and it wasn't your thing, 1, you don't have to include coconut oil at all, even though I put it in mine. 2, you can use coconut shavings, unsweetened coconut shavings instead of coconut oil. 3, you could use, coconut milk or almond milk to add creaminess instead of the coconut oil. So again, I'll just emphasize that chia seeds, when they're mixed with water, they soak up this water and it's like a canvas, so you can flavor it however you want.
Yeah, like I have seen people put berries and different kinds of walnuts and almonds and things like that to give it flavor, to customize it more to their liking. So I think it's a great phenomenon, and I'm starting to see more of it. We're starting to run out of time, but I want you to share with those that are listening how people can get a copy of your book. You're doing a really, really great thing for diaTribe as far as the Name Your Price. So can you share a little bit about that and let folks know how they can get a book?
Surely. So one of the amazing things about where I work is our mission is to help people with diabetes, and one of the ways we do that is sharing what we think is very actionable, useful content. And so this book was a natural mission fit for diaTribe, and Kelly Close, who founded diaTribe, was very on board with my idea that we should make it as accessible as possible, meaning if people want to get it for free, they should be able to. And so if you go to the hyperlink diatribe.org/brightspots, you can name your own price, which means you can click, you enter your email, you click 0 and hit submit, and you'll get the full download of the entire book as a PDF. If you want to donate to diaTribe, we're a nonprofit. You can do that too if you'd like, but you don't have to. And then if you prefer the physical copy, it's on Amazon, and it's just Bright Spots and Landmines, and it's only $6.29 right now. And to be clear, that's price at cost. So diaTribe is not making huge sums of money off of this project because we want the price to be as low as possible so as many people as possible can get it. And so the one on Amazon, just to be clear with people, the interior is not in color because that keeps the cost super low. If you want the color version, you can find it on Amazon if you search for full color. It's more expensive. I think it's $17 right now or something like that. Or you can obviously get the PDF, and then there's also a Kindle version for $1.99. So there's lots of ways to get the book, most of which don't cost very much. Less than a meal out.
Absolutely. And today we actually have a copy of Adam's book, Bright Spots and Landmines. And we've taken all the names of those that have registered to listen in today. Who did we pick? I have the name here. We have a winner. Her name is Ashley Christensen. So congratulations, Ashley. I'll be contacting you later today just to get your information so we can send this book out to you. We are out of time, but if anyone has any questions for Adam, please submit them to us at info@diabetessisters.org, and we'll forward them on to Adam. Thank you so much, Adam, for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us today. For those of you that would like to re-listen to this audio, we will be sharing it on our website, diabetessisters.org, tomorrow morning, and you can share that with others. It's free. You can listen to it as many times as you like. I just want to thank everyone again for joining us today. Our Life Class webinar series is going to be taking the summer off, and we'll be back this fall in September. So please check our newsletter and our website for anything upcoming in September. Thank you all, and have a great summer. Bye.